So I would like to introduce the last session. We have Professor Duo as discussant, and now we will start with Beatrice Mariolle, following with Pam Chenwei, if I pronounce correctly. Beatrice, she's an assistant professor at the ENSA Paris Belleville and a researcher at Ipraus, which is our lab related to ENSA. And please, Beatrice, thanks for you.
Is it okay if I don't take a micro? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if I knew the content of our discussions, we would have more talking about Greater Paris. But anyway, I prepared something on a research that we just finished last December on what we call a frugal, which is a 3 years research on French territories involving geographers, architects, ethnologists, urbanists, and ecologists, and which was financed by ANR, which is the Agence Nationale de la Recherche. The main question was how scattered urbanization, rural or peri-urban, without making the difference between them, can contribute to globally more sustainable territories development. This research is willing to renew knowledge production in a quite paradoxical way by proving that these territories that's okay, let's take it. That's fine.
These ones, so this
Oh,
advance
sorry,
in return.
okay.
That's
okay.
the pointer.
Okay, thank you. By proving that these territories could be qualified with the following notions: proximity to services, alternative mobilities, local economy, ordinary biodiversity, and self-sufficiency. We worked on 14 samples in France, and they are all regional scattered urbanization, and we took them, they are 50 kilometers square, and we took them outside of cities, 20,000 people cities, inhabitant cities. So if we look at this crystalline diagram, it's like looking at in between the planned territory. Antoine Bress, who was supposed to present with me, couldn't come because of a passport problem. That's the book that he just published. And he was part of this research, so I will just show two slides of the work he's been doing on this research around the notion of discrete between the opposite of continuous in terms of mathematics and philosophy. And he worked on the forms of dispersion in these 14 samples, and in terms of distribution of population, services, and he proved that this territory functioned more in terms of proximity than in terms of distance. And that's the transformation of these little villages and towns between 1962 and today, which shows that the scattered urbanization was very, very dispersed before 1960. And see, that's a comparison, that's his work, so that's a comparison between the size of the municipalities and the difficulties we had that municipality doesn't mean anything, because if you have like a municipality like that, right, in the we need to work on aggregate, what we call aggregate, which is each little aggregation of buildings that really make a little form of inhabitant. And he worked on average distance between the aggregates, and they are very close to each other, between 800 meters to 2 kilometers. And then I will focus on my work that I will finally, I changed a bit my mind yesterday, that's why I couldn't come for dinner with you. and I finally decided to present 4 results a little bit maybe faster. I thought previously to focus on one of them, but maybe be more interesting to see different scale of the approach I try to have. So the first one is vernacular, past and future. The second one is living landscape. The third one is interfaces. And the fourth one is indigenous mold. The question, so I just want to say that I work with my students of architecture very much on this subject. And in terms of research, I was working with ethnobotanist from the Muséum d'Histoire Naturelle and ecologist from Urban Eco. I will start with the vernacular architecture and with this definition that Pierre Frey gives of vernacular, which is every alternative answer to global capital flows using local resources, building materials, and labor forces, which means recycling, local energy, water supply, self-construction, forgotten skills and qualities. And rural territories used to have this culture of innovative, low-tech solutions. We decided to collect examples of architecture using local resources. Ancient architecture, of course, but also contemporary one. So we have a big collection of these very interesting techniques, and we try to figure out whether they could still be used or maybe reused, and how much they can teach us on different scales of the territory. The second subject is what we call living landscapes, landscape. And I will start with the J.B. Jackson theory of vernacular landscape. And he talks about the tension between vernacular and political landscape. And I think that's really something that we've been talking about today. And for him, vernacular is territory made by human society, meeting nature, meeting ground. And political landscape is an image, a view from the top. Vernacular is like an archipelago of villages and fields working together. So it's like you said, territory. This goes against standards trying to control aesthetic and harmony of architectural quality. Living landscapes are produced by a humanized nature and humanity naturalized. That's a geographer, Jean-Marc Besse, who used these both notions, which I think are very interesting. So it's something between building and garden. And so with Bernadette Lisée, we work on we very much focused on the site north of France, and we studied a very little neighborhood made of houses and gardens, and a long history of popular culture in a declining industrial territory. We observed on one side, the biotechnologist side, the relationship to building from the garden. and the relationship to garden from the house. And that was a way that our two disciplines, we never had worked together before, could really communicate and talk and put architecture and bioethnology on the same level and discuss. On one side we had seafood production, self-food production, sorry, and on the other side we had self-transformations that people are doing themselves to adapt to climate change in terms of water, of energy. We wrote together, I won't have time to really read that, but that's a story we wrote starting from what people told us about their history of their family living on this place for a long time. So we could start in 1920 and end up today and really reconstruct the history of a family living there, and we try to represent the uses of the ground and the transformation of the limits of the plots. These plots were very much outside, to 1 kilometer from the village at that time. And in 1970, in France, there was what we call remembrement, which was after the war to organize intensive agriculture. Sorry, they really they restructured the agriculture ground, so it was not possible to have little fields. It was only very big, very huge fields. But anyway. So that's and on these drawings we can see how the buildings, little buildings, were added, either in terms of extension of the house, either in terms of needs for the garden, and that's this line between building and garden, which becomes very difficult to draw, that we've been focused on, and which really demonstrates the difficult and the complexity of the relationship between the built and the unbuilt. And what's interested in us is the complementary links between the warm, protected home and the setting, nature, allowing the transformation, self-construction, and all the in-between spaces for economy, leisure, living. And that's the nowadays plot where we can see all the uses of the gardens of the house, and we don't really know where the house stops and where the garden begins, and the rivers. And that's something we very much discuss about, and that's this complexity that we call living landscape. And that leads us to the notion of interface. If modernity goal was a dissociation in order to keep under control the maximum of efficiency, the notion of interface becomes the one for transforming. Maybe that's a big difference between Europe and Asia, that we are in a situation where we have to transform the places, because the places are already built. So now we have to really think of tools for transforming places. And Thomas Sievert was saying it's possible that the compactity is itself an interlude in the development of human civilization. And very much is like this concept. And I don't know if you know Klaus Humpert, it's a German geographer who has been comparing 60 big metropolis, and he demonstrated that the process of expansion did not increase the distance between built-up areas and open countryside, which happens to be never more than 2 to 4 kilometers. Of course, while looking at 1 to 500,000 scale, to 500 millième, okay. But he really calculated this, and the reason is that the way the urbanization expanded is never continuous. It's always fragmented. So it leaves open spaces in the middle of the urbanized territories. So, starting with this neighborhood that we've been working on, we tried to draw the line between built and unbuilt. And through statistics, we used the occupied plots and the non-occupied vegetalized ones. Which means that we were interested in drawing this line between mineral and vegetal. And of course, with this neighborhood, it's easy to do. But as soon as we zoom back, it's more complicated. But to us, it was very important to really analyze whether these open spaces were really important or not, and to calculate the interface between the built surfaces, plots, and the open ones. So I've been doing many drawings like that until what we call the broken line. And we couldn't represent it at the square scale of kilometers because it was impossible, but we could calculate it. And it's very interesting to see that mostly, the results are more subtle, of course, but about 50% of the existing parcels, occupied parcels, have 50% of their sides along an open space, which means that the living landscapes could happen if we could leave these open spaces in the middle of urbanization. So it links back to the question of compactness and dispersion. So the last part is what I call the indigenous mode, in relation to Benton McKay, who wrote in 1998 about the regional planning. He said the regional city is a concrete conception of the indigenous mode, as the metropolis is of the metropolitan mode. This conception is presented in its full nakedness and angularity, not as a suggested pattern toward which necessary to work in a given development, but as a concrete precipitant to clarify our ideas regarding a complex and confusing subject. He argues that the indigenous mode seems to be fundamentally desirable. It provides certain fundamental human contact. The contact of human and nature, as provided in the rural village community, the generalized contact of man and man, as provided in the rural village community, and the specialized contact of man and man, as provided in the urban and cosmopolitan groupings. So the question of this scale is, to me, something very important, and as you said this morning, you know, the scale of the metropolis and of the region, the regional planning is something that really should be worked with the very local small scale and the very large scale. And we've been doing some work with trying to combine, to look at this very heterogeneous territories, scattered territories, with all centralities and new centralities that are the commercial centers, for example. And so we on the 14 samples, so that's back to the 50 kilometers, no, that's 25 kilometers, 25 kilometers anyway. We try to draw the patterns of the flows, the infrastructure of transport, and the programs of agriculture, industry, and commercial distribution with the historic centers. And what we wanted to show in these figures is the great diversity of ground and geographic specificity. And to us it was important to consider these territories from different scale, from grassroots level, tiny transformation made by people themselves, and large human political infrastructure dedicated to big cities. And you see the diagram that we've been doing on this, showing the hydrography, the roads and the aggregates, and then all the four systems that today could be combined to be like to really work back on these territories, and to draw experimentations and transformations by designing and new landscapes, and to read what Beatrice Marriolle said, called the suburbanism, and find the indigenous mode behind the tectonic evolutions. In these times of ecological, social, economical vulnerability, these territories have to deal with despair of their population, feeling not consideration from the metropolis. And using this word of vernacular, interface, hybridation, self-construction, self-agriculture, broken line, heterogeneity, in a positive terms, it's a way to relate to the difficulties and the misunderstanding between the elites, the Gotha, and the popular culture. And I would like to end up with a citation by Benton McKay, who said, "How can we use Earth from the garden to the globe?" Considering post-critic position, there could be a discussion.